So, we have a very special edition of the Media Leader Podcast Live. Jack, how long have you been doing the podcast now? Brilliant. Well, I'm really pleased to have you all with us today, and we're doing this session for about the next half hour. Then we have an interview with Channel 4, followed by 3 presentations from future leaders talking about what they believe the best thing to do is for talent in the North. So it's going to be a fantastic hour, and I hope you stay with us for the whole time and enjoy. I'm going to pass you over to Jack and his podcast. Please put your hands together.
Thank you and good morning, and welcome to a very special episode of the Media Leader Podcast. We're recording this live from the Future of Media Manchester, and it's the very first time we've explicitly done a live podcast at one of our events, so it's a pleasure and a treat to be with you all. I'm delighted to be joined by effectiveness expert Peter Field, by Newsworks Insight Director Heather Dansie, and Lumen Research CEO Mike Follett. Apart from being brilliant researchers in general, they've just debuted a study with us earlier today on how attention impacts effectiveness. And consider this podcast almost like the discussion section of an academic report. You can go and read the report online, read our coverage of the report, listen to Heather and Peter's presentation earlier, and we're really using this as a way to get into the implications of the research. But for anyone who missed the session or who is listening online for the first time and hasn't yet seen the report, Peter, could you very briefly give me a top-line takeaway?
My top-line takeaway is attention should be running everything, and it's not. And if we don't fix it soon, we're going to be looking at bigger problems looming, much bigger problems looming, because I think you've only got to listen to 2 minutes to what Zuckerberg is promising us all in the future of a completely AI-driven media operation. We don't even do creative. We don't do the media plans. We give him a shed load of money, and he spits out, I'm using his words, not mine, spits out the results. This is a terrifying prospect. Not only are they going to be marking their own homework, but they're going to be doing it, the whole damn piece. So we are here to warn you of what's coming, and we're here to warn you that what's been done already is very dangerous, and the attention is the only way forward. That's why it's great to have Mike next to us, because he's done more than anything else to open our eyes to this.
Mike, you didn't get to present this morning. Do you have anything to add in terms of just first top-line implications for the research?
Well, I'm slightly more positive than Jeremiah over here. Because I think that, yes, there are challenges in the industry, but the data we presented showed that there are amazing opportunities as well. And so the first thing I wanted to highlight is something that Heather pointed out, which is that when you're making very hardcore, rational decision-making, hard-nosed business decisions about where to invest your money, attention data can help you work out where the good stuff is and where the bad stuff is, quite independent of where your morals would say, well, we know you should put your money away. And it's just a very good business decision to put your money in high-attention media, and it just so happens that news brands sell high-attention media. So you can take morality out of it, just the hard-nosed, where there's muck, there's brass sort of attitudes that define northern business suggest that you should put your money in those places. The second thing that I wanted to say is that in the studies that Peter has done and with the data that we've talked about, we have talked about visual media an awful lot. And we are talking on a podcast. And the venue is the Royal Northern College of Music, and it turns out we have ears as well as eyes. And it would be interesting, I think, and it's important to note that there are high attention media that doesn't mean necessarily high visual attention media. Radio, podcasts produced sometimes by news brands are excellent places to advertise as well. But the crucial thing is to think about where can I get lots and lots of attention and put your money there. And that's where you get the return, that's where you get the memories from, that's where smart business decision makers are putting their money.
Heather, anything else you wanted to add in terms of just a top-line takeaway?
I would. So I'm absolutely delighted to be launching this research today here in Manchester, because I think, again, to build on a positive, there are hotspots in the online world of where you can get attention. You know, I don't want to be saying that you can only get high attention if you're in, you know, old legacy TV, cinema, radio, newspapers. We know that those are places that get high attention. But if we're thinking about the online space, if we start to think that not all digital inventory is equal, that there are hotspots out there, and if you're selecting the sites and the spaces online where you're going to get high attention, that's going to be really, really effective for you. So I think that there's, you know, this study was about effectiveness. It was particularly, we drilled down into the online space, although it's hugely important to just make that broad link between attention and effectiveness. And I think it's one that our friends at, you know, Thinkbox and Radio Centre will wholeheartedly agree with. But I think if we're just focusing on the digital space, really recognising that if you're putting, and you know, I'm speaking from a news brand perspective, if you're using news brands as part of that, you will be getting much higher attention. So you shouldn't be classing it and measuring it as just part of the online ecosystem. So that's just one thing I'll add.
I wanted to ask a quick question on methodology, and hopefully no one suddenly falls asleep while I do this, but I think it's very important because the data used in the study relies in part on the IPA effectiveness data bank. And critics that I would hear often of your work, Peter, are that it overly relies on that data, meaning that it's overly perhaps biased or reflective of larger brands, of agencies that work with larger brands, as opposed to the fact that a lot of digital spend is being done by quite small brands that might have very different business needs. And so, Peter, I wanted to sort of give you the opportunity to actually address what the implications of using that data is.
Okay, I mean, that's a fair criticism, to be fair. There is a definite skew to large brands, though there are small brands, and we do know quite a bit about the difference between small brands and large brands. But I would just say that what really matters is not whether they're a small brand, but it's whether they're a small brand that wants to become a large brand, or whether they're a small brand that's happy to remain a small brand, because the implications are very different. And we know this from the database because we can track the progress of startups at various stages, and we can see what worked for them at various stages. So we know in the early years of a startup, yes, all of the stuff that we've been talking about, attention, is of much lower importance. Performance marketing is a really powerful tool for a startup, low cost, driven by results. You can scale your business gradually at an affordable level without really having to worry too much about attention levels, because it's just performance marketing. Bottom of funnel, you can rely on people's interest in the product you're selling to drive their attention, however limited it is to you. But what we also know is that as those brands start to grow, they reach an inflection point very quickly, where if they're not beginning to worry about attention because they've got to start building a brand, they're going to hit the buffers pretty quickly. And we see that. We see that anecdotally. I've had loads of businesses approach me over the years since Les and I wrote the long and the short of it, saying, you know, why can't I keep the growth going? You know, we did brilliantly with the short, but now it's run out of steam. So I would say any small business that wants to get big does need to listen to this. It may not be relevant to you right now, but it will be someday. And it's better to take it on board sooner rather than later. If you're trying to build a brand, you've got to be interested in attention, because the two are inextricably linked.
Mm.
And I was just going to add the methodology took into account lots of data sets, and then that was one of the challenge when we were putting it together. And I remember when we very first sat with Peter and Mike on how we were going to do this, and the sparks were flying from a methodological point of view. How are we going to prove this link between high quality, trusted, and high attention media right through to effectiveness? And again, when we were putting the story together, it really flowed through. You know, the brand metrics data absolutely corroborated what we were finding in the IPA data bank. So as we were telling this story, we were able to kind of see the patterns and actually know it was all backed up. So I think that was the challenge, but also the real benefit of smashing these big data sets together.
I mean, actually, if I can just build on something Mike said earlier, what we haven't done, we've only really been able to look at the data for video media in this study, and it's been challenging enough. You think of 250 media plans where you're having to go through and rate them. Some we didn't have we didn't have enough, there was too much non-video media in there, so we deselected those. We've been focusing very much in the use of the Lumen metrics on video-focused campaigns so that we know that we could do it right. So technically, this is by far the most complex thing I've ever done with the IP database. And it's in stage one. We want to do a follow-on study where we also build in creative attention. And I think when we've got those two, media attention, creative attention, we will have a really powerful tool to start to look at what drives effectiveness. But the big omission, and I know from case study evidence, that radio is a very powerful effectiveness platform. But what we can't yet do, I think, is to equate a second of attention to a radio or a podcast ad with a second of attention to a video ad. And they will be different, probably not as different as we all think, but we need that magic number that will enable us to put audio media firmly into our mix and give it appropriate weightings. Now, maybe out of date, you may have,
I have
a
some
magic
good news
answer.
for you
This
on that.
handy
Which I think when we think about attention, what we're really talking about is a relationship between people looking at or engaging with something and then remembering it afterwards or acting on it. When, often we think of attention just as did someone look at things, and I am guilty of saying that that's what attention is, but actually attention is in the head. And to really understand what it is, you need the data about what people were exposed to and if they looked at things or whatever, and also the outcomes data, the memory stuff. And understanding what attention is, in a sense, is the relationship between those two different things. What's really wonderful about this research is that instead of just looking at the Lumen data and applying it to the IPA data sets and just saying, oh, look, some media get more attention than others. We've gone a step further in two ways. One is we've linked it to all this brand metrics data. Brand metrics, the most appalling brand name in the world. They're actually called brand metrics. Totally un-Googleable.
They do what it says on the tin.
Yeah, but yeah, very Ronseal there. So do look them up because they work with lots and lots of publishers to do brand lift studies via publishers. But that means we've got a whole load of data points about were people exposed to ads? Do we think we looked at them? And then crucially, do they remember them? And then with Peter's data set, we've got another load of data about were people exposed to ads? Do we think, and did we see some business uplifts in there? And it's the combination of the input data and the output data that allows us to say something clever about attention. This is exactly the same methodology that we use when we're trying to estimate audio attention, where we don't have any eye tracking, and there's no such thing as ear tracking, but we can have a think about how the relationship with what people could have heard and then what they did afterwards. So we do have that magic number that we're after. It wasn't relevant to this bit of the Newsworks study, so we didn't include it, but certainly stage 2 or stage 3 could definitely include that. Do you think we've got enough on the methodology?
I think that's enough on the method. Hopefully everyone's still awake. Why do we think ad investment has shifted away from high attention media over the past decade? In some ways, I think that's the most important slide that you showed this morning, and it's in the research as well, is a complete reversal of 10 years ago, about 70-30 investment in high attention media channels versus low attention media channels, and that's completely reversed. What's behind that?
Oh no, Peter, you have to go first. Come on.
All right.
I just want to play
I
second
think
fiddle to this
if
one.
you let me go first, you're going to get a bit of a rant.
We're
I mean,
here
I
for
think
it.
the essential problem is that the CFOs are writing the media plans, and that's the truth of it. You know, they are forcing a focus on cost. And, you know, I don't want to be rude to CFOs, and most of the ones I've met, worked with, and presented to have been very, very smart individuals. But marketers, they ain't. Most of them wouldn't know one end of a marketing plan from the other. And why should they? They're finance people. So you have to convince them that you're buying apples and oranges here. The value of an impression on one platform is not the same as the value of an impression on the other. So if you chase money, you end up with crap, basically, and that's the truth of it. But they are driving the agenda. They are making these mistakes. But also, you know, at the risk of sounding a bit like a conspiracy theorist, they are taking meetings with the big digital companies regularly. They have the ear of the CFO and the CEO, and they are being preached a story that says, you know, all you need is to put your money onto the big digital platforms, and we can give you all that you want out of it. You know, we'll give you the costs that you want, and you'll get better results. And of course, that is ignoring the realities of brand building and long-term effects. And I've already mentioned Mr. Z's latest shock horror to hit us all, which is his promise of an AI-driven tool to guide the spending of your money on his platform. Now, this should be terrifying to us all. I mean, not only is it going to eliminate a lot of jobs, but it's going to be funneling money into inventory that fundamentally doesn't build brands. So, you know, well, that I think is why.
You see, I'd take a slightly different... I partially agree with all of that, as I partially agree with the way everything's... But I also think that we're to blame a bit as well in this industry. We're filming this, recording this podcast in front of a whole bunch of people who I assume all media planners. And I'd say it's your fault. You're doing the buying, so stop buying this crap. But also, one of the reasons that not all social media platforms deliver low attention. Some do, some don't. There's good, bad inventory. But what they definitely deliver is an easy life for media planners. It's really easy to buy stuff on Meta or TikTok, or it's just small businesses can do it. You learn the tricks and then you apply it, and their UX is amazing. It really is very impressive. And people like the Trade Desk, people like the sort of IO businesses, it is just harder to buy media. And literally, like, it takes 11 minutes rather than 5 minutes. But that sometimes ease is really good and really valuable. The problem is, ladies and gents, in this room and out there, if it's so easy that a robot could do it, in a few months, perhaps weeks, a robot will be doing it. If you're taking the easy option of buying stuff from the platforms, they are going to disintermediate you. You are doing yourself out of a job. My suggestion to media planners is do your fucking job. Yeah? Don't take the easy thing. Actually think, where am I going to get the best result for my clients? And if your client then phones up and says, oh, you've spent a load of money on what appears to be the easiest platform to do it, how do you justify that? And you say, well, I wanted to get home on time. You know, then they have every reason for sacking you, because they could do that themselves. Many companies are taking it in-house. So for media buyers, the listeners to this podcast, the people in this room, I'd say, what value are you generating? Do your jobs, which is to take information like this seriously and not take the easiest option, but do the right thing for the clients. So while we can blame the hordes of salespeople that Mark Zuckerberg employs, and while we can deride the fact that these platforms mark their own homeworks, you know, and they say, you've spent this money, and look, we've given you these clicks or something like that, you know, which is absurd in itself. The people that we should really be having to think about is, who is buying this story?
Well, I think it's about ease, but I also think it's about being risk averse as well. So I think that factors into it as well. You know, it is the easy option, but also you're not going to get fired for putting more and more impressions into Facebook. Whereas if you're not thinking about efficiencies and you're thinking about effectiveness, then you really need to be looking at where are the high impact, high attention places that your ad really, really lands. So, you know, from a news brand perspective, just the ludicrousness that people are avoiding the best places, the best news stories out there, which will be the hard news stories. The hard news stories in print, everybody wants to be around them, but when it comes to the digital space, the word blocking is meaning that you don't... I mean, the craziness is nobody wanted to be around World Cup football footage. Like, nobody wanted to be around that space, and that is where all the eyeballs are. That's where there's loads of interesting stories. If you think that attention is around the surrounding content, and that the ads get the fantastic halo effect of that, then this is exactly the kind of content from a journalist point of view that you want to be beside. So, I think as well, you know, if you're avoiding football coverage in case the footballer shoots at goal, Right? That's of huge concern, because that is where your consumer will be, and that's where your ads will have the best impact. So I think as well, it's about ease, but it's also about actually, let's take some risks. Let's put the places that you know will get high impact and go for it. I think that's really key.
And also perhaps redefining what risks are most important to you, because of course there's risks inherent, as your research outlines, into spending in places perhaps with low attention. Something that the research touches on is quality. And we got quite a few questions during and after your presentation this morning that were submitted about this subject, essentially asking, are all news brands equal within the study? Because I'm sure subjectively, everyone in this room and listening out there has their favorite publisher that they like reading, especially with regard to news. Maybe it agrees with their worldview, maybe it disagrees with their worldview a little bit. Where does quality sort of come into this conversation?
So I think when we talk about quality, and yes, everybody has their preferred news brands, and that is exactly how it should be. We're incredibly lucky in this country that we have journalism that spans political and social spectrum. I think it's a very dangerous world if our journalism only sits in one bubble or one bucket. And again, I question our industry. You know, do we live in a marketing bubble? We need to be aware that people may think differently from you. And so from that perspective, quality could be subjective. But for our industry, what we mean by quality is it regulated? Is that piece of journalism accountable and can be criticised and has to hold up to scrutiny? I think that we're incredibly lucky, and I do say this when you look at journalism around the world and the threats to journalism around the world, that journalists can hold power to account in all the guises, you know, right across all the news brands that Newsworks represent. They'll be holding all different kinds of people to account, and then similarly, they are also accountable. So I think when we talk about quality, we're talking about, is it regulated? It's a simple answer.
Mike, I know you've got actually a separate research project that's looking at this a little bit. It's in the works. Can you speak a little bit to how quality is perceived by different people?
Yeah, because I think we mean very different things by the same word, quality. And so it's really good to get a definition there. Ipso regulation, perhaps, as a sort of kite mark of quality. When we think about quality, we mean, do people read the website slowly and engage with the content and therefore engage with the ads? Because that's what good journalism, whether it's regulated by Ipso or not, does tend to end up with slower scroll speeds. And because people are scrolling because they want to read the article or they want to watch the video or whatever, therefore they watch the ads more. And so our quality is just attentional quality. What we've found is that people make a third distinction about quality, which is like quality of journalism, like if it's the FT is somehow better than the Sun or something like that. And there I think you have to remember that newspapers know their audiences, and it's quality for a particular audience. And that's what's really, really important. We've just recently done a study with Imperial College London about what used to be called, attentional differences between what used to be called the Manchester Guardian and the Daily Mail, which might be on different political sides of things, but also perhaps slightly different audiences, and you might say slightly different levels of sort of semantic quality or whatever. What we found was that when we're comparing ads appearing on both those newspapers versus ads in social media, is that the same ads do much better on the news brands than they do on social media. But the same ads do amazingly well, equally well, amongst die-hard Daily Mail readers and on their newspaper, and die-hard Guardianistas on their newspaper. It's quality for that audience that makes a difference. What's really important about the Imperial College study is that we also looked at what you were talking about hard news. Lots of people, this isn't about shoot and things like that. This was actually about appearing next to politics. Oh my God, perhaps if I put my ad next to a story about Ukraine, people will think that Unilever believe in invading countries. Oh my God, is that going to be a problem? No, it's not a problem. People are big enough to understand that DAS does not endorse the invasion of Ukraine. And people are clever, and it's nuts to think they would. And again, I just go back to sort of some tough love to media planners here. who are you defending when you use these ludicrous exclusion lists? Which means you don't advertise next to the most highly attentive places amongst, subscriber audiences like The Guardian or regular people like The Mail, who you think you might be defending the brand, but in actual fact, you're doing the brand a disservice because you're not buying against the best media. Really, you're saving your own job because you're worried that the clients are going to phone up and say, why has my ad appeared next to this or that, the other? Grow a pair. Again, do your job to say, my job is to put ads next to the best content to get the best attention, to get you the best results. This is how we do it.
Begs the question why people haven't grown a pair already. Because, Peter, you've been working and putting out research like this for many years now, and the problem's only gotten worse as you see it. So why isn't all this work sinking in? You hinted at a couple of reasons for why low attention media is perhaps getting more investment. But going forward, first of all, what should change? And second of all, why hasn't it changed already?
No, I mean, you're right. I certainly do feel like one of a number of King Canutes here, and that we keep giving enormous evidence-based arguments for why what is going on is crazy, and yet the tide just keeps coming in. I think there are many reasons. I think Mike's touched on them, the ease of going with the flow on this one. I've touched on things saying there is a big, big pressure coming from above on marketers and media planners to say, just stop asking questions, just deliver what we all know is the sensible thing to do. And then it's just a lot to take on board. You have to be quite brave. I mean, I buy what Mike's saying about just grow a pair, but actually you have to be quite brave to stand up against all of the things that I've been talking about and say, look, I think there's a huge opportunity in zigging while everyone else is zagging. Everyone is chasing CPM. Let's chase ACPM. And we know, I mean, I've used Lumen data, which I think is fantastic. If you look at the hierarchy you get in media terms, if you're buying CPM, it is almost exactly the reverse of the hierarchy you get if you're buying, ACPM. Because the attentive cost per mil is precisely the opposite. So you've got to be brave to stand up with a well-entrenched currency in media buying and say, no, I'm going to not buy dollars, I'm going to start buying euros instead. Now this takes definitely a pair. I think the argument's got to be taken to the higher levels. We're not going to win this one by simply bullying media planners and media departments and junior marketers and clients. We've got to convince their CEOs. And
Stop bullying people, Mike.
I thought it was going to be Peter who was going to be the controversial one here.
What?
Well, I'll be positive then. I'm gonna stand on the side of positivity because I think as an industry we know we've gone too far, and I think that chart that we show is really powerful because it is the flip. But I think we know this. When we've been talking and presented this morning, I could see people nodding in the audience. We know that high attention works. We know its effectiveness. So and there's the News Alliance. So thinking more broadly than just news brands, if we think about news as an industry, radio news, TV news, the News Alliance is a really powerful consortium of people coming together saying, look, if we want a world with journalism, and I think we do, if we want a world with journalism, not just because it's good for society, but because it's really good for advertising as well, then we need to be investing more in it. And I think we're hearing really positive rumbles right across when we're talking to strategic leaders and and senior staff. But I do agree with you that when that then trickles down to perhaps more junior members of the team who really need to then actually build the plan and then measure the plan, that's where I think you start to get the sticking points, and that's where we need to see the action. So, from a Newsworks perspective, I'm just going to do a plug. We have things like the Newsworks Academy, where we're trying to teach the next generation of planners, right? Look, this is the power of our medium. This is why it's so effective, and this is why you should be considering it and being brave to your boss and putting it on the plan and measuring it correctly, because if you're not isolating it, you're going to get lumped in with the rest of digital. If you're not putting enough investment into news brands, then you're not going to see the benefits from our econometrics models. So, I think we need to be teaching our young planners about how powerful different mediums are, and I think if we do that, then yes, right through the chain, from senior leaders right through to the teams building the plans, we'll make better progress.
Mike, I'll give you the very last word.
And then I think perhaps we should take a leaf out of Facebook's book of just making it easy to do the right thing. So it's all very well, and we have establishing that there's a problem. There is a problem. People are buying the key to it is to make sure that this attention data is built into planning tools so that you can have attention-adjusted reach curves, or so that it's built into DSPs so you can go and buy the high attention stuff programmatically, automatically, rather than having to take difficult, brave decisions, or so that you can measure stuff via viewability companies like IAS and Double Verify and report on attention and not just viewability. And the good news is, it's all there. All the big agencies use Lumen data within their planning tools. You just have to, as clients and as planners, you just have to use it. All the big DSPs have attentive segments using Lumen data to go and target the right amount of attention. You just use them. IAS, DV, both of those companies use Lumen data to power their attention products. So the thing is, yes, we have to be brave, but it doesn't have to be difficult to be brave. In actual fact, the tools are all there. It's easy to do the right thing. We just have to do it.
Amen.
Amen.
Be brave. Keep me as a journalist employed. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on. Thank you so much for your time. Please, a round of applause for our panel.